Kannst du mich jetzt hören? Kann man mich jetzt hören? Okay. Nochmal von vorne, oder? Mhm. Okay. So yeah, technical problems can arise at any moment. So I will start again. So I welcome all of you to today's webinar, which is on the topic the significance of treadmill training in neurorehabilitation. And my name is Cornelia Schlick. Some of you may know me. For others, I am a new face at HP Cosmos, and that's why I would like to take the opportunity to shortly introduce myself. So I have a background in physiotherapy and human biology, and I worked at the University Hospital in Munich for around 10 years. And during the first years, I worked practically as a physiotherapist with mainly neurologic patients. And then I pursued an academic career and did my PhD on falls prevention in the field of neurology. I started working for HP Cosmos this year in January. And here I work as the application specialist for the medical field. So the structure of today's webinar is that I will first give you some theoretical information about neurorehabilitation and the importance of gait training, and then show you an actual case on the treadmill. Some organizational aspects. If you have questions during the webinar, please write them down in the chat box, and my colleagues and my co-workers here, they will collect all your questions, and there will be a short section after the webinar where I'm happy to try to answer them. So I would like to start with the question, why is neurorehabilitation actually important? And this graph shows global data on the numbers of patients with neurologic diseases, and in particular stroke, Parkinson's disease, and multiple sclerosis. And I think it's easy to see that the biggest group of people with neurologic diseases is stroke. So there are around 42 million people living in the world with the consequences of a stroke. And I tell you that this number is probably even underestimated, since the surveillance system, so the reporting system of countries, varies widely, and most probably it's underrepresented. So the number is probably even bigger than 42 million. What I find actually more remarkable and worthwhile to mention is that over the last 3 decades, the number of neurologic diseases increased tremendously. So in the case of stroke and multiple sclerosis, we see a 60% increase in the numbers of these patients. And then in Parkinson's disease, there's even an increase of 120% from 1990 to 2018. And the reason for this is mainly growing population sizes with, at the same time, an aging population. So we get more people, and then we also get older. And that's why particularly these neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson and Alzheimer's disease, explode in numbers. The pathophysiology behind these diseases differs widely, but there's one symptom most of these diseases share in common, and that is that the vast majority of the patients suffer from gait disorders and gait problems. And this results in reduced or restricted mobility. And the range of restricted mobility can be from actually being bound to a wheelchair or being bedridden, over being able to generate some steps, but being in need of a walking frame or a cane, a crutch, to being actually an independent walker, but have difficulties managing long distances, for example. So walking capacity might be reduced. And the actual problem in daily life for the patients is actually that they can't really participate in their participate in their daily life. So this example shows a stroke patient, and let's call him Jim at this point. And Jim is in need of a walking frame, and he can't really walk around in the community. That's why also he can't take his car. He is not able to take a bus to get anywhere, which means that he can't go to the supermarket or the post office. He can't participate in family life, and he can't keep up with his hobbies, which in his case is bowling. So that example shows that gait training and keeping patients mobile, even when they suffer from neurologic diseases, is absolutely crucial. And then over the last 3 decades, with the progress of technology, treadmill training has become a very popular and widely used technique to retrain gait function. And in this case, the example shows that Jim is actually unable to manage long distances to walk. He's in need of a walking frame, mostly sitting at home, but then he's admitted to a rehabilitation phase where he does extensive treadmill training and shows improvement afterwards. So now he's more mobile, he is in less need of the walking frame, less dependent on it. And ideally, he's also more able to participate in daily life. So he can actually maybe take the bus to go and do his grocery shopping and go to see his daughter for her birthday and maybe even start playing bowling again. The question behind this is treadmill training actually effective? So what is the scientific background of treadmill training? And are there enough studies to confirm that treadmill training is actually evidence-based? And there is a huge body of literature that was merged into a so-called meta-analysis, and that was published in 2017. So this meta-analysis shows a summary of the study results of 56 trials or studies that made a complete or a whole study population of 3,105 patients. And this was on the efficacy of treadmill training with body weight support for walking after stroke. And the results showed that to evaluate the results of it, we actually have to group the patients into 2 clusters. And one is patients that are actually able to walk or at least generate some steps after the incident of a stroke. And the other group is patients who are actually dependent on a wheelchair and they are not at all able to walk after the incident of a stroke. And the overall result of this meta-analysis is that treadmill training is highly effective for the people who show some kind of walking ability after the stroke. So they can increase their walking speed, they can increase their walking capacity, which makes them walk faster and makes them walk longer distances and longer times. The study also shows that for the group of people who are like completely immobile after the incident of a stroke, it might be a good idea to use robotic assistance, even to a point, or at least to a point where they are able to generate some steps, and then they can also start doing treadmill training. And how is the study landscape for Parkinson's disease regarding the efficacy of treadmill training? There is a similar meta-analysis with some less studies. So there are only 18 trials, which made 633 patients. And in this meta-analysis, studies were included where patients were actually kind of able to walk, at least with a walking frame, or they showed some degree of walking ability. And these patients with Parkinson's disease, they showed that treadmill training can improve also their walking speed and their step length. So these patients, after treadmill training, can walk faster and they do make longer steps, which is very crucial in these patients, since one of their main symptoms is a shortened stride length or a shortened step length, and that has impact on several other mobility parameters in these patients. So seeing that there is literature and scientific background that promotes treadmill training for neurologic diseases such as stroke and Parkinson, one might also be interested in asking the question, why is it effective? And the answer to this is neuroplasticity. So our brain is highly adaptive. Actually, over the whole course of our life, and even under the circumstance of a disease like stroke or Parkinson's. And what happens is that through extensive training, brain activities that are actually associated with the walking function can be transferred to a different brain location. And for this to happen, there are several factors that are really crucial. So key requirements. And one is task specificity. That means that if you want to train walking, you actually need to walk. So learning to re-walk again is done by walking. The other two factors are related, and that's intensity and duration. So intensity means that in one training session, you have to generate as many movement repetitions as possible in order to facilitate neuroplasticity. And you have to do that over a prolonged time. So the more intense the training session is, the better. And the more training sessions you perform, the better. And this slide shows that with the technical development over the last decades, so the technical progress is actually only possible to generate or to design a therapy situation where intensity and duration of a sufficient kind are possible. And there are also assistive devices developed for adding it to the treadmill training. And HP Cosmos came up with the idea of building the RoboWalk, which is for neurorehabilitation a very crucial tool to support people while they're walking. But this will be the topic of the next webinar. So today we focus on the pure treadmill training for neurologic disorders. So far I gave you an overview on how important neurorehabilitation is and how crucial it is to retrain gait, and then gave you some scientific information about this, some scientific background, and then also the explanation of why it's working, and the answer is neuroplasticity. Now, it's very interesting now to see how is treadmill training actually designed in clinical practice. And before I demonstrate you an actual case on the treadmill, I would like to briefly explain the courses of the therapy. So there is a starting point, obviously, and an end point of the rehabilitation phase. And in between, we have mostly 8 to 28 training sessions, depending on the rehabilitation service. And I base these numbers on the German rehabilitation services. So at the start of the therapy course, the patient has the lowest skill level. So it's most impaired in his walking function. And the difficulty level of the training needs to be very much adapted to the patient's skill level. And then, as the therapy process continues, the patient hopefully shows an increased skill level. So he improves in walking function. And the training design needs to be also adapted to the patient's actual skill level. So adaptation in the therapy progress is a core element. And then the system that we use, namely the treadmill, also needs to be highly adaptive. So let's look briefly at the phases of the rehabilitation process, and then name which treadmill features are actually specific to neurorehabilitation. So in the early phase, when the patient is most affected, so shows the lowest skill level in walking, the most support is needed, right? And the support is provided by some features of the treadmill, and they are listed here on the slide. So first, we need body weight support. The body weight support system mostly helps the patient to, or supports the stance phase during walking and also the weight shift during walking. Second, we need handrails that are adjustable. With the handrails, the patient can stabilize his or her trunk really well. Also gives some more support, but the key feature of handrails is the stability of the trunk. And then naturally, the treadmill comes with a rotating belt, and at low speeds, the treadmill belt actually itself helps to move the affected leg or the legs backward. So it supports the stance phase and the weight shift forward. And then also external guidance can be applied during a treadmill training, and I will show you that in clinical practice. Also, the ramp that you can see here makes the access to the treadmill way easier. And then let's look at the intermediate and the later phase of the therapy process. So obviously, with the increasing skill level of the person, we need to decrease the support, meaning we decrease the amount of body weight support and we decrease the amount of usage of the handrails. And then at the same time, we have features that can make the training more complex. So we have the option to vary with different speeds or play around with speeds. We have the option to put the treadmill into elevation. So we can actually do uphill training. And with the function of the reverse belt rotation, we can also provide downhill training. And then the therapist is asked to also make the training more complex by adding dual task activities. Giving an additional motor task, for example, with the hands, or giving an additional cognitive task. And how that looks, I will show you in a minute. So the case that I constructed for this webinar is the following. We have Mrs. Miller. She is 68 years old and lives together with her husband in Nussdorf, which is the actual town where HP Cosmos is located. Unfortunately, she suffered from an ischemic stroke 6 months ago, and this resulted in a hemiparesis of the left side of her body. Walking is only possible for some meters inside her house with a walking stick, so she is able to generate steps, but she uses a wheelchair outside the house to be able to manage longer distance. And her main difficulties during walking are progressing the hemiparetic leg forward, shifting the weight onto the hemiparetic leg, and then also she has a drop foot, which means that she can't really lift her foot during the swing phase. And I will demonstrate 3 stages of the course of the therapy. So we will begin with the first session. So I'm going to see her for the first time, right? The main goal in this today is to enable the patient to walk and train basic walking skills. I'm going to show you that right now. So here we have Mrs. Miller. And the first step is that I help her to get into the body weight support system. Okay. Okay. Stehen Sie mal bitte auf. Okay, the first step here is to find out which amount of body weight support is the right amount at the very start of this training phase. And in neurologic disorders, it is known that between 0, obviously, and 25% is a good starting point. Because if you use more body weight support, the walking pattern becomes completely unnatural because you don't bear enough weight to actually progress your weight forward. So in her case, since it's the very first training session, I will adjust now 20% of body weight support. Okay. Es geht jetzt ein bisschen nach oben. Okay. The next step is to adjust the handrails into the right position. And the handrail position is very crucial to support the amount of trunk stability. So I will, at this early stage of the therapy, make the width of the handrails closer or more narrow. On both sides. So Mrs. Miller, unfortunately, also has her arm affected by the stroke. And that's why she can't really hold herself at this early stage of the therapy with both hands. So she's only using her right hand at this point. Okay, I make some more adjustments to the vest and check if everything looks nice and safe. That's the most important thing. Okay, and the next step is to find the right speed. So in her case, we start with a very, very low speed, and I will ask her to tell me when it feels like her medium speed range or her self-preferred walking velocity. Since the self-adjusted or the self-paced walking is the easiest for the patient, and that is what I will start with. Okay, wir starten mal. Okay. I mean, since Mrs. Miller and me, we normally talk German, I will not talk to her so much right now, but instead tell you what I'm going to do. So I adjusted 1 kilometer per hour right now, and I think that this is a good starting point for her. And our real case here, fortunately, is not really affected by a stroke, but what you would see is that the left leg here would be very hard to progress forward for her. And what I could do as a therapist in this moment is like bend a knee down or sit down on the therapy seats that are optional to this treadmill setup. And I could come here right next to the treadmill and actually support her leg getting forward. The goal here is to increase the step length of the paretic side and to make it more easy for her to put weight on her paretic leg. What I could also do in addition is put external cues to the treadmill. So I have a red mark here that I put on the side of the treadmill. And I position it at a place where I want the paretic leg to land. And then I ask the patient to orient herself at this mark in order to facilitate a step length. Okay, können Sie mal mit dem linken Bein bis nach vorne treten, genau, dass Sie auf diese gedachte Verlängerung der roten Markierung treten. Ja, wunderbar. Ganz richtig. Ja. So at this very early phase of the therapy process, I could also play around a bit with different speeds, but not too much. So at this very first training session, my main goal is to generate as many step cycles as possible. So I could leave it like at 1 kilometer per hour or play around between 0.8 and 1.2 kilometers per hour. But this is basically the setup for a very first training session. Goal is enable the patient to walk and train the basic walking skill. Okay. We stop at this point. And then we make a jump, and I show you how the fifth session could look like. And the goal here is to train more complex walking skills. And the first step is decreasing the body weight support in order to challenge the patient more. Okay. So right now I adjusted 10% of her body weight. And then what I also do, and I came to the wrong side, is increase the width of the handrail. The wider you adjust the handrails, the more difficult it is for the patient. Because it's more difficult to use it to stabilize your trunk if it's further away from your body. And what I would do during the first part of the training session is increase the walking speed. So we might, since her skill level already improved, since we're in the fifth session, I would assume that we reached a training speed of around 2 kilometers per hour. So at this point, we have reduced the body weight support, and we have adjusted the handrails in that it's more difficult now, and we have increased the gait speed. And I would do that for maybe, like I said, the first half of the training. The second half of the training, I would do more complex walking tasks. But for this, we need a slower treadmill speed. And I adjust here 1 kilometer per hour. So now I will train with the patient to walk sideways and backwards on the treadmill. And this is for improving coordination skills. Okay, Frau Müller, können Sie einmal sich zu mir herdrehen, bitte? Genau, und da hinten loslassen. Und seitwärts gehen. Seitwärts, so. Ja, genau. Okay. Die Hüfte ein bisschen weiter nach vorne bringen. So please bring your right hip a little further towards me. Noch ein bisschen die Hüfte zu mir bringen. Genau. Große Schritte machen. So make big steps to the right side. Zur rechten Seite. Hip a little more towards me. Here. Okay. And as I see, this might be a little too fast for the patient. So I adjust the walking speed here. The treadmill speed. This is more easy for her now. Okay. And then please turn to the front again. Wieder nach vorne drehen, bitte. And then please turn towards me to the other side. Nochmal zu mir drehen, bitte, jetzt. Genau. Und in die andere Richtung. So, this is sideways walking into the other direction. And so, bring your left hip towards me. Linke Hüfte in meine Richtung bringen. Dieser Teil hier. Mhm. Große Schritte machen. Make big steps. Okay. Und dann drehen Sie sich mal bitte um, dass Sie dann rückwärts gehen. Also nach da festhalten. So turn around and then walk backwards. And interestingly, for stroke patients and many other neurologic diseases, the backward walking at slow speeds is a little easier. It's much easier than walking sideways, and it's sometimes even easier than walking forward. Okay, nochmal zu mir drehen. So please turn to the side again. Weitergehen. And then turn to the front again. Wieder zur Front drehen, bitte. Festhalten und weitergehen. Genau. So, as I said, the goal of this fifth training session was to integrate coordination aspects, train with higher speeds, less support, and then we could also add something else. If the patient is at the right stage, we could add a cognitive load. And at this point, I would ask her maybe to explain me what she's going to buy in the grocery store today. I won't do that right now, so we won't show it since you can't hear Mrs. Miller. But this would be one option to make it more difficult and add a cognitive task to the training. Now we pursue quickly and jump into the 10th training session. And here the main purpose is to train walking in demanding conditions. The reason for that is that so the treadmill is a very safe environment, a very safe environment with controlled conditions, right? But in daily life, you have more demanding tasks to achieve. So that's why the 10th training session is more demanding for the patient. What I would do is train without body weight support at all, and if possible, even also not use the handrails. And at this point, I would start with training a higher walking speed, and then in the second half of the training, I would put the treadmill into an elevation mode. And here I adjust 8% of elevation now. Okay. And then I use the reverse belt rotation mode of the treadmill. I ask the patient to turn around. Können Sie sich mal umdrehen, bitte? Und nochmal, dass Sie nach da schauen. So what we're doing here now is downhill walking. Okay, das Laufband startet. So we start the treadmill. Okay, so increase your step lengths, bisschen größere Schritte machen. Okay, very good. So there's no body weight support at this point. She's only supporting herself a little bit with her right hand on the handrail. And now, to make it more complicated and more demanding for the patient, I will even ask her to follow my instructions and have an additional motor and cognitive task. So I will shortly explain this to her in German. Ich mache jetzt die Übung mit Ihnen, wo Sie bitte nach rechts schauen, wenn ich Ihnen eine ungerade Zahl sage, und nach links schauen, wenn ich Ihnen eine gerade Zahl sage. Okay? So I instructed her to turn her head to the right side when I tell her an uneven number, and turn her head to the left side when I tell her an even number. And now we will check if that works. Okay. 2, 2. See? And it's getting way more difficult for the patient. This is the false stop, I guess. Okay, weitergehen. Nochmal vorwärts gehen, genau. Okay, so we start again. Also bei einer geraden Zahl nach links schauen und bei einer ungeraden Zahl nach rechts schauen, okay? 2, 7, 7, 9, okay. Walk a little more forward on the treadmill. Ein bisschen weiter nach vorne gehen. Okay. Hold yourself a little forward here. 12, 12. Okay, and then look forward again. To the front. Nach vorne schauen bitte. Nach vorne. Ja. 3, 3. Und wieder nach vorne schauen. Look to the front. So as you can see here, I can choose to make the training way more demanding with different physiotherapy techniques at any point in time. And, okay, ich stoppe das Laufband jetzt. Other features might be that we use different directions. So I say north, and then the patient points to the sky. I say east, the patient points to the right. So we have different techniques to make the training, the walking training, the gait training, more demanding at any time. So I'm coming to the end of the webinar, and I would like to formulate take-home messages for you. So treadmill training is a scientifically proven strategy to improve walking, and treadmill solutions provide a safe and adaptive training environment. Key features that are specific to neurorehabilitation are a body weight support system, adjustable handrails, and the elevation mode and the reverse belt rotation to make the training more demanding at some point. And it's very useful to have a wheelchair ramp to have easy access to the treadmill. There are more features that may have further enhanced treadmill training, and that is a RoboWalk expander system that I mentioned before. This is part of the system. And then there are also virtual elements that you can work with during treadmill training. For example, visual stimulation, where foot targets are presented on the treadmill belt. And these topics will be tackled in the upcoming webinars, and I would already like to invite you to that. Soon we will also tell you the new dates for the webinars. So at this point, I would like to ask my colleagues who are in the background here to put your questions down in the chat box so I can see if there was any question that I could maybe answer at this point. Or you can also type it down yourself. I have frequently asked questions. So there are people who come to me and say like, I have a treadmill, but I have particular questions regarding the training. And one of these questions is, should we train with shoes or should we train without shoes? And I tell you that training without shoes has one advantage, and that is that perception is trained. So the perception under the foot. And the disadvantage of it is that a lot of neurologic patients can't really walk without their shoes that they're used to, or they can't even walk without it because they have an orthosis to prevent the drop foot that was simulated here on the left side. So my recommendation is train without shoes if possible, or use the shoes that the patient is used to during training if this is the only thing that is applicable. Okay, and the other questions, how much body weight support is needed, I already answered during the practical demonstration. So it's recommended to use 0 to 25% according to the skill level of the patient in neurologic diseases. Training at minimal, preferred, or maximum walking speed, well, I would always start with the preferred walking speed because that's the most easy speed for the patient to generate. And then when you use speed that is less than the preferred walking speed, it actually gets more difficult for the patient. More balance is required to walk at slow speeds. And then also, it's more difficult to put the patient into the maximum speed. So minimal speed and maximum speed, I would apply that in the later course of the therapy. Okay, so as I didn't see any further questions in the chat box, I would like to thank you very much for your attention at this point. If you have further questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. I have my email address and my phone number displayed here. All the documents, so the presentation will be, I think, put on a download link, so you can download everything after the webinar. And I would very much like to welcome you during the next webinar on the RoboWalk and the visual stimulation system. Thank you very much.